boys and girls. Today it's time for chapter 24 of the Wise Enchanter. The children are getting so close to finding all of the symbols. Here we go. Gzosa, Sifo called back, the language of my grandmother on my father's side. Ngosi, Nikyabanga, thanks in Xhosa and in Zulu, the languages of my father and my mother, he added as Rukmini gave him a hand onto the boat. Then Sifo helped Michael and Lauren into the boat too. Apka, Swaga, hi, Rukmini said, turning her face away from the wind. That means you're welcome in Hindi, the language of my grandmother. I don't remember it much anymore, she shouted, but my grandmother doesn't want me to forget, so I will try not to. A big wave rocked the boat violently, and the four children gripped the sides with all their might. The wind caught the sails, and suddenly the boat leapt across the waves, skimming readily over the choppy seas as if blown by some generous, knowing wind. Against the cold wall of winter air, the boat sailed on. The children huddled down, rocked furiously from side to side. The sails bulged, filled with an icy wind that blew them onward into the open sea. The water was as dark as the night around them, but the dormouse's eyes gleamed, for he was awake and alert. Soon the wild waves calmed somewhat, and the four children fell into an uncomfortable but exhausted sleep. The sky barely grew light when the sun came up. It was a small sun, a faraway sun, in an expanse of misty gray nothingness. The children slowly awoke and stretched their aching limbs. They were sailing between rocky islands which stood starkly against the sky. None offered any place to land, so steep and craggy were their sides. The sea crashed around the rocks at the base of the cliffs. The children noticed that there were caves and holes in the rocks, as though the pounding waters had worn them down for centuries. As they sailed very close to one of the big rocky outcrops, something bumped the bottom of the boat. "What's that?" Rukmini said, hardly daring to breathe. "It could be," Lauren began. "It's ice," Michael said. "Look around." Beneath them, around them, when they looked carefully, they could see that the water had formed into solid blue-gray lumps. The boat had wedged itself between rocks and ice. They looked up. "It's going to take a bit of work to free ourselves," Michael said. "The rock is hollow up there. It looks like some kind of cave entrance," Sifo said. "We could go in there and make a fire." "I'm frozen," Lauren said. "I used to enjoy the cold and snow when we lived in Scotland, in the far north, but this is too cold even for me. I don't think I can manage to do anything until I'm warmer." "Me too. Me too. Let's take what we need and go up there." With a strong piece of rope, they helped one another across the rocks and ice and up to the cave opening, taking only the magic book and whatever they needed for a fire. As they climbed through the opening, Sifo ran his hands over the rocks. "This isn't just a cave," he said. "Someone has made this entrance. The rocks have been placed like this on purpose." "Yes," said Rukmini, and crawled in after him. To her surprise, the cave was light and bright and reminded her of the inside of a beautiful shell. But that was not the end of the surprise. As they all stood together inside the cave became more like a room than a cave, and they no longer noticed the cold at all. At the other end was an open door, and through it they could see daylight, bright, beautiful sunshine of the kind they hadn't seen for a very long time indeed. There was even grass and hills. Finally, they all noticed that there was something else in the room. It looked like a table, and behind that, to their amazement, someone sat. The children had forgotten all about being cold. In fact, they were so warm that some of them began to peel off layers of clothing. They set down all their supplies for making a fire, and with that, all thoughts of making one. The person who sat at the other end of the room was a woman. She wore a blue cloak with a hood, and she was bent over almost double with age. As they came closer to her, her midnight blue eyes rested on them. She lifted an ancient, wrinkled face to greet them. "What brings 4 children to the very end of the world?" she croaked. "We're on a journey to find the castle of the Wise Enchanter," Sifo said, noticing at that moment that the table wasn't a table, but a beautiful musical instrument. "He's ill," the old woman said gruffly. "Ill?" said all 4 children at once. "How can that be?" "It can be, in the same way that I am here, banished to reside in this cavern at the end of the world, when I used to be everywhere and anywhere. I fear you may be too late." "What?" Rukmini gasped. "We can't be too late. We can't." "Who are you, ma'am?" asked Michael politely, remembering what his grandparents had often told him about how to speak to older people. "Madame Conch Ens," the children heard her say, and she smiled. "Mostly people know me only as a little voice telling them to apologize when they do something unkind, or reminding them to be unselfish and to consider others. But for a long now I've been ignored. For many years no one has heard me. I'm thus banished to the end of the world, where I am of no use to anyone anymore." Now, they spell her word conch and ends. I don't know if you can see that. Probably not. But that's just kind of a stand-in for conscience, which we all know as our little uh-oh voice. "That's terrible," Rukmini said. "Can we do something to help you?" "Good question, dearie," Madame Conch Ens said. Rukmini thought she saw tears glisten in the old lady's eyes. "I'm not sure you can, though. You can try. If you do succeed in your quest, you can know that I will immediately be set free and will begin to expand over all the earth again, so that everyone can hear my whispers. If you don't succeed, well, eventually the ice will enter here too, and I will freeze over. But there is something I would very much enjoy right now. This instrument has been silent for as long as I have. Can any of you play it?" "What is it?" Michael asked. "A xylophone," Lauren said. "A big double one." "It looks like something I played at school in Africa," Sifo said. "I know how to play the marimba, so maybe I can play this." "Go ahead, my boy," said Madame Conch Ens, and handed him 2 long poles with rubber ends. The xylophone was a beautiful instrument, fashioned out of metal and wood. The metal pieces gleamed in the light that shone so unusually through the door at the end of the cavernous room, even though the vision of grass and hills and sunlight had now vanished. Each metal piece took on a color of the rainbow, and as Sifo began to play, the most beautiful music filled the room. Every note sounded like an enormous raindrop, round and pure and clear. As Sifo played one note after the other, they ran into each other, and Rukmini and Michael and Lauren and Madame Conch Ens and all the hidden underlings felt like the music carried them far, far away from where they were. "That is the music that could melt the heart of a monster," Madame Conch Ens said softly. "Thank you," Sifo said and smiled. He began and then stopped. He stared down at the sticks in his hands. "What's the matter, boy?" Madame Conch Ens said. "I'm making an X with the sticks in my hands," he exclaimed. The other children bent over to look. "Yes, you are making an X over a xylophone. It's extraordinary." "We have the letter X. Thank you, Madame Conch Ens. Thank you," Sifo said. "Excellent. May I give to you the gift of the xylophone? It might be put to good use one day," she said. "I'm afraid, though, that it's too big to carry with us in our little boat," Sifo said. "We can make it small," Madame Conch Ens said, and shrugged. "Just take it in your hand and press." Sifo looked at her and at his friends, bewildered. "Take it and press it small?" he murmured. Then he went to the xylophone, took it gently by its edges, and in no time at all he held it in miniature in his hand. Now put it in your pocket, Madame Conscience said. When you need it again, simply take it out and play. Madame Conscience, Michael said, I do hope that we won't be too late to rescue you. I would like to ask you so many things like, why are you called Madame Conscience? Does that have anything to do with conch shells? Are they ending? The shells in the sea? Do you end them? Can they end you? But the inside of this cave looks like a giant conch shell, so I can't imagine that they are a danger to you. If you remember what a conch shell looks like, it's the kind that if you hold it up to your ear, you're supposed to be able to hear the ocean in it. It's beautiful. She smiled at him. You will understand one day, dear boy. Look. She turned to see Lauren struggling to lift the magic book out of its bag. It took 2 children to lift it now. Sifo drew his hands, making an X over the xylophone into the book, and then he put the little instrument carefully in a pocket that had buttons on it. Thank you again, Madame Conscience, he said, and bowed to her, touching his hands together. Especially for the warmth. It is so lovely and warm in here, and everywhere else it is not. Madame Conscience winked. Well, are we warm enough to be on our way? He asked, turning to his friends. Here is the X that Sifo made with the xylophone sticks. So what do we have left? X, Y, and Z. We're getting closer. See you next time for chapter 25.